Hey guys, I'm going to read Deadly Hits with you. Now, a couple quick things. Make sure um, when you go into Schoology to read this, it's a little small, so you may need to. You can just click up here and zoom in a little bit. I'm definitely need to with my old eyes. All right, so Deadly Hits. Remember, we're really taking a look at all the text features as we go through this. So we're looking for captions, we're looking for subheadings, we're looking for infographics. All right, this gives us a little background information about what we're going to read. After a 13-year-old football player suffered a life-altering brain injury, he and his family dedicated their lives to making youth sports safer for everyone. Gives us a little background of what we're going to read about. All right, October 12th. Holy cow, my eyes are worse than I thought. I need to zoom in some more. All right. October 12th, 2006 was crisp and clear in Seattle, Washington. A perfect day for football. Parents chatted in the stands as two middle school teams faced off on the field. As always, 13-year-old Zachary Lystet was a player on his Tahoma Junior High team. He'd already made two big tackles that afternoon, helping put Tahoma in the lead. Late in the game, first half, Zach tackled a runner rushing toward the end zone. As both boys tumbled to the ground, Zach's head smacked against the turf. The other player quickly scrambled to his feet. Zach did not. Zach lay on his back, clutching his helmet and writhing in pain. His coach ran to him while his fellow players took a knee and waited for their fallen teammate to get up. Seconds ticked by. The crowd remained silent. Finally, Zach sat up. Cheers erupted from the stands as Zach stood and walked slowly off the field. His teammates slapped his back. Zach sat down to rest, and the game went on. Football as usual. But something unusual was happening inside Zach's head. Zach had suffered a concussion, a kind of brain injury. When his head hit the ground, his brain shook violently against the inside of his skull. Sitting on the bench with his teammates, Zach seemed okay, but billions of cells in his brain had been injured by the impact. Playing through pain. There's subheading. Going to tell us what we're going to read about here. Today, some 2.8 million kids in the U.S. play football. For many of them, football is more than a fun and exhilarating game. It's a way to build discipline and character. It can also be a way to pay for college, and for the lucky few, a ticket to some of the best schools in America. But over the past decade, America's favorite sport has come under intense scrutiny for the high rate of brain injuries among players of all ages. From the dawn of football in the late 1800s until very recently, knocks to the head were considered just another part of the game. Tough guys played through the pain. After a hit to the head, many returned to the field with blurred vision, aching temples, and stumbling steps. Toughing it out was seen as a sign of strength and loyalty to teammates. Over the years, this attitude trickled down to even the youngest players. Zach had grown up watching some of his favorite football stars treat their heads like battering rams, colliding with their opponents with ferocious force. Popular video games like Madden NFL showed players staggering along the field with serious head injuries. Sportscasters ran highlight reels that celebrated the most brutal hits of the week in college and professional football. So it's easy to see why less than 15 minutes after his injury, Zach decided his team needed him. As happens to many players, Zach didn't realize he'd suffered a serious brain injury. He didn't know that by returning to the game, he was risking brain damage or even death. Ticking time bomb. Zach's coach looked him over. A concussion, also known as a mild traumatic brain injury or mild TBI, is an invisible injury. It leaves no outward marks. Without special training, even some doctors can't detect one. So when Zach said he felt fine, his coach did what many coaches did when a star player said he felt fine enough to play. He sent Zach back to the field. Zach played like a champion through the second half of the game. He sprinted, blocked, and made key tackles. Meanwhile, his injured brain was a ticking time bomb. Each small hit and jolt pushed his brain toward disaster. In the game's final seconds, Zach raced after the other team's running back. He crashed into him, forcing a fumble. It was a game-winning play for Zach's team, but there'd be no celebration. Barely a minute later, Zach collapsed. His brain was bleeding and swelling, pushing against his skull. The pain was blinding Zach. The pain was blinding. Zach drifted in and out of consciousness. With his frantic parents and coach by his side, he was airlifted to a hospital where surgeons worked feverishly to save his life. They removed large sections of his skull to relieve pressure. By that night, Zach was in a coma. It would be 3 months before he opened his eyes, 9 months before he could utter a word, and nearly 2 years before he could eat on his own. He would need care for the rest of his life. Second impact injuries. It's shocking to think that a friendly middle school football game ended with a healthy young player in a coma. And indeed, only a very small percentage of kids who play football sustain life-threatening brain injuries like Zach's. Concussions, however, are more frequent. About 10% of middle school boys who play football sustain concussions during games. According to the American Journal of Sports Medicine, most people who get concussions will recover with proper treatment. Untreated concussions, though, can cause constant headaches, memory problems, mood swings, and other issues which can last for days, months, even years. In Zach's case, it was not the initial concussion that caused his brain to bleed and swell. It was those second, third, and fourth small knocks to his head that happened after he went back into the game. In other words, if Zach had sat on the bench, gone home, and stayed off the field until his brain had healed, he would likely have been able to keep playing football in high school. What if? During those first weeks while Zach lay in the hospital, the words "what if" haunted his parents. What if Zach had understood the dangers of concussions? What if his coach had been trained to recognize them? What if what if there had been a rule in place to ensure that injured players didn't return to the game? It's the hardest part of this, knowing that what happened to Zach could have been prevented, Zach's father Victor had said. As the Leicestists focused on helping their son recover, they became determined to prevent other athletes from suffering Zach's fate. Working with lawmakers and doctors who treated Zach's injury, they helped develop the Listed Law. The law prohibits young athletes who are suspected of having concussions from returning to play without approval from a medical professional. Since 2014, the Listed Law, or similar laws, have been passed in all 50 states. The National Football League became a major supporter of the Listed Law. The NFL has also passed tougher rules about concussions. Today, it's against NFL rules to tackle head first, and doing so comes with stiff penalties. Players who get a hit to the head are immediately evaluated. The NFL isn't the only organization paying attention either. In 2012, Pop Warner, the nation's largest youth football league, implemented special training programs and new safety rules. It now limits tackling drills during practices. Tackling is closely linked with concussions. Many youth football teams have done the same. Some teams, especially those with younger players, have eliminated tackling altogether. A new version of Madden football was created too. No longer are injured players glamorized. The makers of the video game say they now see it as an important educational tool for kids' safety in sports. We'll take a look at that in a second, but let's look back at a couple of the features here. So obviously a photo here of Zach. Okay, and what do we call this? Underneath a photo, it explains what's in there, is a caption. Zach's parents, Victor and Mercedes, have been awed by their son's toughness throughout his journey of healing. This photo shows the family at a Seahawks game in Seattle when Zach was in high school. Down here we have another little infographic about brain disease in professional football. Okay, and then here's some more important information as we finish off the article. These are encouraging steps, but most experts agree that concussions are still a cause for concern in youth sports, especially in contact sports like football and soccer. According to the Centers for Disease Control Prevention, the CDC, 69% of teen athletes return to play despite having concussion symptoms. This is a problem that Zach and his family are working to change. The road to recovery. It's been almost 14 years since Zach's injury, and his recovery has been long and difficult. In addition to relearning how to speak and eat, Zach spent most of his high school in a wheelchair, doing 30 to 40 hours of physical therapy every week, working with the same gritty strength that made him a star on the field. Today, Zach can walk with the assistance of a cane. There's no one tougher than my son, Zach's father said. Sometimes players and parents wrongly believe that it shows strength and courage to play injured. Strength is seeing Zach stand up out of his wheelchair and learning to walk again. Learning to talk again. Zach and his family remain advocates for safety in youth sports. Their work has helped change the way many players and coaches, parents, and fans think. Zach also travels around the country spreading the word about the dangers of concussions. Everywhere he goes, he sees his message is the same. No game is more important than your life. Super important. Okay. So, what to know about concussions? This is also called the infographic. Has a lot of statistics, has some numbers, talks about the symptoms. It's something that someone can look at really quickly and learn a whole lot. So one of your tasks that you'll be doing, you're going to be writing and doing a flip grid where you do it's right down here actually, a PSA, which would be a public service announcement. So you're going to use some of these facts, some of these statistics in your public service announcement when you are going to give some advice to other kids about concussions in sports and what kids should do. So that's one of your last tasks for the week. I hope you guys have had an awesome weekend, and you have a couple tasks that you'll complete based on this article, and we'll go from there. See you guys.